Hi everyone, Jessica Sanders here of ColorMeCreativeArt.com. So today I am going to share with you an unboxing and sort of a testing out of these Winsor Newton pigment markers. I'm going to try it on a lot of different kinds of paper and we're going to see how it works. So thank you for watching. I am so excited because when I first saw these, the display was so beautiful. I thought I have got to have some of these markers. And then I started checking into them more and I found out that these are a totally different kind of marker than anything I've seen before. Now, maybe there's some other brand of pigment markers out there. I don't know. But these are made by Winsor & Newton, and they're made with pigments instead of dyes. They're fine art markers, and they have a 100-year light fastness rating. So these are very nice markers. I actually decided to buy two sets. There are over 100 colors, and so I'm going to take these out and show you a little bit about the packaging. First of all, the packaging, this plastic, is very difficult to get off. Here's my first try. You can see it's sort of mangled, but I figured out the easiest way was to use my X-Acto knife and to actually slit it down the edge. I had taped this one back together. It just took too long to do it on camera. And this is the little latch, and now I'm just going to peel that off. And there are my markers. They also have a little piece of tape here, which I use my X-Acto knife to cut. And then you can just slide the top off, just like that. Now this is my first time using them, and actually this is as far as I've gotten up to this point, only to take the lid off. So you'll notice that there's an array of blues. This is the, what did I call it? This is the Blue Tones set. I also have the Flesh Tone set. And it comes in this nice container. And you can see it has individual slots for each marker. Put my markers back in. Now this doesn't stand up. It has a rounded bottom. That is probably because these are supposed to be stored flat, horizontally, not vertically, so that the pigment doesn't pool. They are dual tipped, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But I want to show you a little bit about this packaging first. You notice there's a hole. So my markers is not in this little slot. It's the perils of live recording. It has to be turned just so. Okay, so you notice there's this hole. That's so if you buy these combination packs, what are they called exactly? They don't have a specific name, I guess, for the type of sets, but basically they fit together so you can store them together. Slide it together like that. And stack up. I haven't tried this before, but that's what that little hook is for. Should the lid go on? Yeah, okay, there you go. And then you put the lid on and look, they're together. They're stored. You store them flat and you are good to go. And you can take the lid off with that on there, but you can't see the marker set on the bottom, so lid off, unhook. Awesome. Okay, so I'm mostly going to focus on the blues because, you know, I love blue. And I am super excited. So I have this set of blue colors, and I want to show you they have two different nibs. On the rounded end, I think you can see it has a chisel tip point. Also, there's inside the cap, you need to make sure you get it into the hole. The lid won't go down if you don't get it into the hole. Don't jam it in there. You might mess up your nib. This is a fine tip bullet point. on the other end, and that end is a triangular shape. So you have this round barrel, ergonomically designed, they say, and on the round end, chisel tip, on the triangular end, fine point, bullet nib kind of thing going on. These are not brush markers. It has the color name, and it also has the color on the tip. I love the design with the white barrel and just the strip of color. It just makes it very easy to see the colors. And then if you notice on the triangular end there's no color, then you can just put that down in your slots. They're a little difficult to get into the slot, but I think that way, and you can see the colors even through the lid. You can see the colors, which is kind of a nice feature. Okay, so the only thing I know about these markers is what I've seen and heard on the reviews and things. When I ordered them, because of what I saw in the reviews, I also got the specially created Winsor Newton Pigment marker paper. And this paper is lightweight. It's 20 pounds, and it's smooth coated specifically for these markers. They designed this paper especially to go with the pigment markers because, as I think we're going to find out, they're completely different beasts, so to speak, from other markers. So there is that. And I got the bigger page. It's really nice. These markers cost between $25 to $40 a set, which is a kind of, a big investment, but I think it's going to be worth it. They're going to be so much fun to play with. Okay, so I'm going to just take out a couple of markers. I'm going to take this one, and this is a special pen that is completely new. It is a white blending pen. So you will see, this is not a clear blending pen. This is actually white. It's not completely opaque. You can see my skin through. But this is a very unique blending pen. So we're going to see how this works. I have all of these different kinds of paper. I have Bristol paper, glossy laser paper, glossy cardstock, UPO paper, and Winsor Newton pigment paper, which is designed to go with these markers. I can tell you, based on what I've seen already, this is not going to work on Bristol paper, drawing paper, the way it's intended to work. It's just going to soak right in, and that's not the way these markers are designed. So I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to try they roll everywhere. That is something some people aren't happy about, but you can find a way to work around it if you really like the marker. So I'm going to show you on this Bristol paper first of all. Now these look pretty much like regular markers. And then it's kind of comparing apples to oranges, but I have a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, which is an India ink pen. This is a pigment marker, a completely different formulation, but for the sake of just a comparison, I have the Pitt pen. Also sinks into the paper, that's what you expect of a drawing paper, or Bristol paper. Okay, so we have this white blender. I'm going to see how this works on the Bristol paper. Does it actually blend? Okay, so I see it did pick up a little bit of the blue, but not much. And it just went over the top. It didn't really blend into the pigment. But it does pick up a little bit of the blue on this Bristol paper. I'm doing this one first. I'm going to do side by side of the others because I think the others we're going to see a big difference. Okay, so then I'm not going to try and do any blending. I do know when these pit pens are wet, they'll smudge, but then they're dry and they're permanent. These, do they smudge on this Bristol paper? No, not really. And actually the pit pens smudge better on a non-porous surface than they do on here. But so there is that. Now the question is, do they blend with each other while they're wet on this Bristol paper? And the answer is no, not really. You can see a definite line doesn't go together at all. So there we go. So that's the Bristol paper. I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you, I think, the Winsor Newton paper first. Now, I haven't tried this before, so I don't really know for sure how this is going to work, but I have a couple of sheets of each kind of paper, so I can try it. I feel, since this is a coated paper, if I feel of it, it feels a lot like the UFO. It just feels a lot like the UFO. I don't know what it's coated with, but they feel very similar, so that's why I want to try the UFO. And because I feel like they're going to work better on a less porous surface, I've got the glossy cardstock and the glossy laser paper, just for fun, Okay, so the Winsor Newton. Now, what everyone is saying is these are very painterly. Ooh. Okay, so I think you can see a big difference between that and this. These are much more juicy on this paper. And let's see how it does with the white blender. So you can really blend out that color. Look at that. I do have blue on the nib. Just keep going and gets that off. Okay. Now this looks like it was still smudged. Yep, it will. That's almost dry. Now does this blend after it's dry? Okay, I see it picking up the other color. These are very juicy. Stays on top of the paper. What happens if I try and blend with it wet? So it does blend, but it's not like super smooth blending. I think you can see it's not super smooth. It leaves marks. I think that's why marker artists, illustrators are saying it's very painterly, because you can see the marks and strokes, and it leaves little puddles of the paint. So this was the dark. Now, just as a comparison, we can smear that. It's still wet. Once it's dry, you're not going to be able to smear it. Just by comparison, I have this Pit pen, and I just want to see how it does on this Winsor Newton paper. So I see, first of all, it doesn't cover as well. It has like a little bit of texture. It does smear a lot. So compared to this smear, it's a big difference. Smears a lot. I kind of like that, though. I mean, if you want to do that with the Pit pens on the Winsor Newton pigment paper, but it looks quite a bit different from the pigment markers. I think you can see these. I think I might have said already, but if I didn't, these are made with India ink, so they're a little bit different. So let me I'm just playing around with it a little bit here. So what I noticed, though, is you don't really get a smooth blend. Now if I go back in with my finger, it's a little bit more smooth. I don't know that a lot of marker artists blend out with their fingers like that, but I'm more, I'm a painter, so anyway, there's this. Okay, so now let's just do some side-by-side testing. We've kind of just done a little just dive in kind of example. We have the Bristol paper. These markers are not intended to blend on this type of porous paper, so this paper is coated. So let's do a side-by-side of Windsor and Newton pigment paper, Yupo, glossy cardstock, and we'll do this, glossy cardstock and laser paper. Let me see. Can we see all of those? Yes. Okay. And I'm just going to do the same thing. So it feels different on the glossy cardstock than it does on the Yupo and the Winsor Newton. I'm just trying to see how that. It goes on really smoothly. I think you can see this has a more of a grainy texture than the Yupo. Of course, the Yupo is a plastic kind of paper, so that's probably why it looks smoother than this coated paper done by Windsor. It also leaves the little puddles. It did the same on the glossy. It's much smoother feeling. It glides more smoothly on the glossy paper and the glossy cardstock. Now I'm going to see if that little puddle will smear. Yeah? Yeah, more. Look at that. I picked up more. And what about this glossy? No, that's dry already. And this glossy cardstock is almost dry. Okay? Now the next test, I guess, would be to see how the white blender works on these. I'm going to use the fine tip. Oh, you can see it automatically picked up that blue. It's not dry on the Yupo yet. See that on my hand? But it was dry on here, but it's not dry on the Yupo. It sits on the surface like on the Yupo, but it didn't. It dried faster. Kind of like that effect. Okay, enough playing. Okay, it does the same. It picks up that color. You can blend it out. Blend it out. It's a little bit wet. Okay, now what about this glossy? It's the same. Or it's not exactly the same. It feels different, but you can blend it out. That's what I'm trying to say on this glossy laser paper. Now what about this? Again, it picks it up. Maybe it picks up more, and it seems to blend out. It takes a little longer to blend it out. So just want to make sure I get the blue off that tip. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Now that was dry with wet. Now let's try same thing, but I'm going to do quick and see how this blends out. Can I blend it all together? Yes, I can. That's on the pigment paper. It is streaky and it is painterly. Now how about on the Yupo? Set my lids down. Will that blend out completely? Yes, it will. Now what about the glossy laser paper? This feels like very smooth compared to these. These both have a little bit of tooth. Even though they're smooth paper, they both have a little bit of tooth, but this doesn't have as much tooth, and I let it dry. Okay. Can I blend it out? Yes, I can. Cool. Now what about this one? This is glossy cardstock, similar to the laser paper, just heavier. Blend it out, yes. And then what if I take the whites? Blend it out. A little. It says wet longer on the UPO. If you don't like that, don't use it on the UPO. We kind of like it. Okay. Make sure I match my lids back up with the color. Okay, so I can see how these can be a lot of fun. Yes. And I think you can use them on anything that is glossy. Now, will they, move as much? Probably not. They move the most on this Winsor Newton Pigment paper. You can see you get that really nice, and it looks very soft and matte finish. Whereas if you use this glossy paper, it's much more glossy. It's a much more glossy finish. The colors are very intense. Let me see. What if I try a different color? Let me try one from the flesh tone set. Let me just try a kind of a middle color. This is Burnt Umber Light. It's pretty close to that. Try it on each. And then let me try the, what happens if you blend with the blue, with this, this is Phthalo Turquoise Light. What happens if you blend with this turquoise? You really warm up that color. Can you do that here? So I really like, what I'm liking about these is how you can see the strokes. Like, I like that you can see the strokes. That's probably the painter in me. And if you're just a marker artist, if you're not a painter, if you're not a painter, you might not like that. It looks a little different here than it does for the Winsor Newton paper, I think because it sits on top longer. Okay, so one more thing I want to test is the water. I have a water brush, and so pigments usually move with water. If you have pigment stamp pads or something like that, they usually move with water. I'm kind of wetting, just kind of making sure there's no color on my paintbrush. Okay, so I want to see if these move with water after they've dried. All of these are dry, including this last one that I did. Well, I said that, but let me check. So the Yupo's still a little wet. You can see my little smudge there. See, still wet. Still wet here. That little puddle was, but that's it. Okay, wet, dry. These are all dry. Okay. So I want to see what happens when I use water on it. And I'm going to use this very first spot that I did so we can just test it. Okay, so it does pick up the color. And you can see it sitting on top of this paper. That off. Okay, what about here? Yes, which I totally expected that with the Yupo, but I didn't know if it would with the Winsor Newton paper. But it did. Let me get that off my brush. Now what about this glossy laser paper? Yes, still picks it up, but it sinks into this paper faster. Like, it doesn't go, like, I went all around over here on the Yupo, but it doesn't do that here. It's done pretty quickly. Okay, and then the glossy cardstock is probably going to be similar. So yes, it does. Guess what that means? For me, drips and drops. That's what that means. It means you can remove the color that off of there. You can get a paper towel. Remove the color. That's from the Yupo. How about from the Winsor Newton? Need some more water. Clean our water. How much color can you remove? What about from here? Yep. So you can remove color to a certain extent with water. So then that begs the question, do these need to be sealed? And I'm not prepared to answer that question today. And if they do need to be sealed, what can you seal them with? That's a question for another day. But yeah, so that is pretty exciting. I'm trying to decide if there was something else I wanted to do. What happens if I just spray it with spray? What will it do? So it does wick. Okay. And you can see this paper got too wet because it's curling up. It is only a 20-pound paper. It's really thin. Okay, but you can see it wick. See it wicking into the water, just like a watercolor would do. This, not so much. What about on the Yupo? We'll do down here in the green. I got that really wet. Okay, so yeah, like I can pick this up and just move this color around. It still leaves some color on the page, but it definitely moves the color with water. That opens up so many possibilities. I'm telling you. Did not really move very much on this glossy laser paper. And I bet just for kicks, what does it do on the Bristol paper? Move these markers just for kicks and see what happens. I don't think it's going to move very much, although it may surprise me. This is the pit pin. Let's see what happens there. So, no. Like it picks up a tiny bit of the color, but I think what is happening is that on the Bristol paper or any kind of drawing paper or even normal marker paper, this is going to pick up, it's going to sink in. These pigment markers are going to sink into the paper, and so they're not going to move as much like they do on the Winsor Newton paper or the Yupo. You can see it's still sitting. It takes a long time to dry on Yupo because I put a lot of water and because it's Yupo. It's plastic. Okay, so it's still wet on the Winsor Newton and still moving. Opens up a lot of possibilities. I don't think I would color into the water, although I think you could probably, one more thing. Okay, let me just take this I'm trying to find a piece of plastic for acrylic sheet, and I can't really find one. Okay, let's just use the one I came in. So this acrylic sheet, I think you could use this like a watercolor. Take your marker, color on your acrylic sheet. So use it like a watercolor marker. But this is not a watercolor marker. This is a pigment marker. It's not water-based. It's not alcohol-based like the Copic. I saw a lot of people comparing it to Copic. It's kind of like what I'm doing with the pit pins. It's like comparing apples and oranges. It's not the same thing. It's a pigment-based, and it's completely different. Okay, so if you spritz that with water, or And you come in and pick it up with your water brush, and then, so if you use, here's something to note. I think you can see it leaves the little texture if you use it on the marker paper. How about the UPO? Yeah, pretty much the same. It leaves a little texture if you do it this way. What about the cardstock? You get a different effect than if you were coloring with the marker. This is kind of similar, but you know, I think you can see there's a difference. Okay, so that was just a fun little side experiment that I didn't really plan on doing. But it's good to know that you can activate these markers with water. Even after they're dry, they activate with water. So for mixed media purposes, you know, that's something that's important to know. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me for my little paper test experiment with the Winsor Newton markers. Again, I am super excited to be trying these out. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with them, but really like the effects that you can get with them. It's a lot different than that. Much different than the Pitt. And I love the Pitt pens. So it's not a matter of, oh, should I use the Pitt, should I buy the Pitt pens or should I buy the Winsor Newton markers? No, it's apples and oranges, like I said. Just be an art junkie, you can have both, right? Okay, so like I said, just a quick recap. Winsor & Newton pigment markers, completely different than alcohol-based art markers or dye-based markers, or even the Pitt pens, which are India ink. They act differently. They have their own special paper. And another very unique, completely unique feature is they have a white blender pen. They have a clear blending pen also, but I don't have that one. But this is the first white blender pen on the market, so really get out there and take advantage of that. It really does blend the color really, really nicely. So, okay, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this, but I'm going to play around with it, maybe do some sort of drawing, coloring, abstract work, and maybe do a speed painting of that for a different video. So, thanks for watching. Let me know what you do with your Winsor & Newton pigment markers, or how you feel about this, or if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I will talk to you later. Bye!